All right, well, we'll call the select board meeting to order, and I'm actually gonna turn the chair over to Larry, as I am not there.
We start the liquor control board, right?
Yeah, we'll start with the liquor control board. We'll call that to order and look for any public comment for items not on the agenda. Not seeing any, we'll move to approve the agenda.
So moved.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. I have to wait for Trini. And we'll consider a new first-class liquor license for Oak and Iron. Or do we have any concerns about any of these that we should be wondering about? Can we do them all at once, or do we have questions?
We could. We split them up just so you had the new one separate from the renewals. That's the only reason they're split into two like that.
Questions or concerns from anybody?
No, I think I looked through these like a little while ago. I think they had somebody certified on all of these, correct?
I believe so, yeah. And you approved, Oak and Iron was here last time, but that was for a third class. This is the first class, which covers beer and wine. Otherwise, it would have just been whiskey and steak.
Oh,
No, it's not like a problem, but people might want other stuff, I suppose.
Okay. Motion to approve all licenses as presented.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes.
Motion to adjourn.
A second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. We'll call to order the regular meeting. Public comment? Time for public comment, if there's anybody out there. Not seeing any public comment, we'll move to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Consent calendar.
Motion to approve meeting minutes.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. And we can go on to our first item of business, which will be to consider the RACD grant request.
So I think, Diane, you're here on behalf of RICDC, so maybe the board wants, you can get walked through what the request is. over to
Sure.
you.
Thank you very much for having me this evening at your meeting. The first item that we have for this evening is to approve the grant for VCDP for the amount of $750,000. The grant application for this particular grant was approved back in November. We have the grant agreement draft in hand, so we would like to bring it before the board again and ask for your approval to go forward with the grant.
Can I just correct one thing there? I don't think we approved the actual application. We approved RACDC applying.
Yes, that's correct. My apologies. That's correct.
The reason I bring that up is I saw in the notes where the town is to be reimbursed for our costs only up to what you folks applied for admin for the town.
The town, I believe, gave us the number that they wanted for their reimbursement of costs.
I don't know that I've ever seen that. Have we ever given a number, Trevor, of the dollar amount we think it'll cost to manage one of these?
We started to try to capture administrative costs, but usually the number we've given has been whatever the maximum is allowed in the grant. So 5,000's been a standard number for years, so we might put whatever is up to the maximum after asking that question of DCDP staff. So if there's an origin for it, I would think it would be that.
And that doesn't really capture it though.
Based on what we saw with the Playhouse pass-through, it captures some things, but not everything. We had a legal bill associated with some title research that doesn't seem reimbursable, so we're gonna be out $350 for a title search on a building we don't own, but
my concern here is we don't have a lot of staff right now, and we have some vacancies, and we get into this every time another pass-through grant comes in. And I'm fine with the low dollar amount, but we're gonna need Commerce to give some type of letter that says we're just truly passing these through. There is no role or responsibility that the town has to meet. And we got this from A&R recently on the New England Precision Grant, and we have been swamped with time and effort of different things that they have then come back on us to do. You know, we're in an arm wrestling match with them right now. To the point where the question get out of this. So if we're gonna be capped at $5,000, then we ought to be capped at $5,000 worth of effort. And there ought to be something. I know we had a meeting with Commerce on some of this before. And they talked about they can go directly to our ACDC to do all their audit work and all that kind of stuff. So but we've never gotten that anywhere in writing. Like, what is it really that they think the town's willing to do with a $5,000 cap? I would bet you New England Precision, we're up closer to the 15,000 mark right now.
Yeah.
Easy. And we're not even, and it's not even resolved.
Had 6 different staffers, I think, at different points.
Yeah, which also takes away from other things that need to be done too, so
Yeah.
it's not just a dollar amount.
That's a good point.
So do we have an understanding of what the town has to do then at all for this one, or how we have to manage it?
Based on, I think, past for this type of project, so because it's housing pass-through. I mean, some of the wrinkles with the other ones is that they're newer and/or there are other entities involved. The housing pass-through ones don't anecdotally at least seem to have changed as much in terms of what's required when. But in large part because of the pass-through dollars, we're in single audit territory the next time around. We will be for a while because we'll be above threshold, so there's just extra management for us in terms of making sure that's part of any RFP process and how we manage those things, and finance staff time that goes into that, even though it's grant related stuff. So we do try to keep track of it separately, but it is a task.
So the cost of that audit too, right? The cost of the audit is higher once we hit
Yeah.
that threshold, which these grants are what are throwing us into that.
And I think we can be reimbursed for some of those costs, if not, I don't remember what those thresholds are, but single audit costs have been part of the reimbursement mix in prior iterations. I don't think that's changed, but I don't know if there's a cap or not.
But it's not if we're capped at 5,000.
Yeah, if it's the same bucket, then no, it wouldn't, because I think a single audit, we're probably talking, I don't know, 7,500 to 12,000, depending on audit firm scope availability. Totally rough guess, based on what we've seen with other audit costs.
That's for an overall audit for the town stuff, or is that specific to this
Single audit,
grant?
we'll look at if we get X number of, I forget what the threshold, 650 or whatever it is now, 700,000 in federal money. So this counts, even though it's not lingering with us, it counts as us receiving a certain dollar threshold in federal dollars. And so the single audit looks at those federal dollars and programmatic pass-throughs and any local matches and those pieces. Tries to examine just that piece of it.
Mhm. Is there any willingness from RACDC to cover some of that cost?
I'm trying to remember back to the application. I don't know to what extent we've talked about the single audit piece at least. And I can't remember the application. I know there's a section in it when you apply. I'm not as hands-on with that part of the process.
Was RACDC anything
I
to add in on
don't know
that?
if Diane remembers remembers
Diane's
the
not gonna
application or any of those, and I think might be more familiar with some of the housing stuff, I'm channeling some real old.
What is the dollar amount what's the amount that our ACDC put in their application to offset all these expenses the town has? And I think we just decided the town didn't put the application in, right? The town didn't write it. When we got requested, it was to request approval for you to apply. We didn't
That's
see the
correct.
application. So do you have the application there and you can tell us what dollar value was put in for town expenses?
If I understand the question correctly, it was $5,000.
That's not gonna cover it.
I don't know if we got to application phase, how much single audit would have popped up as one of the expenses, but it should be a standard part of the process. And I think we do try to capture some of this with our grant policy that's been developed in terms of how we review these things, but I don't, time-wise, we were, I think in transit, they probably missed each other in terms of applying a review process fully to try to capture that on the front end, but the single audit will cover this grant plus others, so I don't know if what you want is, one way to crack that out might be to try to assign, take all the federal dollars that pass through or anything that triggers the single audit and then assign a percentage of ownership, and that's the percent of single audit costs we try to seek from those entities. So it'd be X from the Playhouse folks, it would be Y from our ICDC.
But we might not know that what that is until like the end of the year, when everybody's had a chance to get in whatever grants we would end up processing.
Yeah, what we would use as the marker for that though would be within the fiscal year, because that's sort of the basis we're looking at. When did we, we probably try to base it on award acceptance, signing of the grant agreement, and try to log it that way. And so based on total award, not the amount expended, keep kind of running.
So just-
or some sort of metric like that.
So come up with some sort of proxy that we can say, if your award
Yeah.
is of this size, we expect this amount towards the audit.
Because we time it with the regular audit, which if we get back into a regular cycle, so by September, we're starting that process, say to conclude, so we should have June 30 year-end numbers too, to look back toward. But I need clarification, is it the total awards, or would it be the amount of federal dollars pulled through in a given year? It's been a while since I've been through a single audit, so I just don't recall.
Can we do an approval of this contingent upon Commerce clarifying the expectations of the town and that they're truly just passing through? There's no lingering liability or efforts like what the mess we're getting into right now with New England Precision.
Yeah, we could verify that. One of the other things you could consider too is why the NEP one, what we did a little bit differently that's been really helpful is we could even seek a separate, we have our own sub-grant agreement with NEP in that one. That further clarifies, hey, the state made these representations about ownership and liability and responsibility. That's great, we want this extra layer of security. You're agreeing to do these things or these things happen. So we'd explore, take that template and just say, it's our understanding that try to develop something that's our own little sub-grant agreement. It's not enforceable through the grant thing, it's more of a contract, it's an agreement between us and the entity that receives the pass-through funds. I kinda like it as a practice because we're finding, through the best of intentions, we're trying to pass money through to these projects, and at the state end, whether there's turnover or newness or whatever it is, changing federal regulations, we're caught in the vice. Trying to run stuff down, provide answers, and it's not our project. So we could explore something like that if you wanted an extra layer of protection with this and set that, we've already set that precedent, pass-through grants, we just haven't required it of everybody. But we only started doing this with that ARPA fund pass-through from DEC. And thank goodness we did.
Yeah.
And more than once we've pushed it back across the table, basically said, no.
But we got A&R to agree to that also, right? That was that was an agreement they had to approve before we entered into it.
Yeah, and they're gonna approach us about an amendment to it that we'll have to consider carefully in terms of does it keep the intent of the original sub-grant agreement. So really it would be tied to but separate from whatever the state accepted. Because it's really like if you want the money and we're the conduit, the entity has to agree with us. The state can say they like it or don't like it, but at the end of the day, that can be our point of insistence, really. I mean, it's, you want us to pass it through, you gotta agree to our standards.
So in this case, we might wanna,
And it wouldn't be onerous, I don't think. It would just be about clarifying, like, if there's a reporting issue, the state comes after us, that's, your issue entity. You have to resolve that, and you have to do that within a timely manner. The things that are already getting done anyway are the things that we're spelling out.
I think it also just sets up better communication of just understanding between the entities too. When it's in writing, then there's no question when things pop up of who's responsible for what. I think it's smart. So would we need to write the sub-grant agreement first and then approve this? Would that be the best action?
I'm thinking about how we keep them moving in, keep this element in there, and maybe what the motion is. Because really what you need, Diane, is a motion to accept the grant in some form, but you make a motion to accept the grant contingent upon review of the grant agreement, which we've done before because we like to see it before we fully sign off to it. Creation of some sub-grant agreement and some assurances from BCDP that this is truly a pass-through and will function as such. So you can create a structured, we accept it, but here are the things we want to see. Kind of a motion, and then you'll have a later action to accept or adopt the grant agreement itself, so there's still a second process step
Okay.
whenever the grant agreement's done.
But that would give RACDC enough to kind of move.
I would think that would keep you rolling. It's grant acceptance, it's just we wanna see these things, and in between while the draft grant agreement's getting done, we try to get the other stuff in place, so when they come back for that piece, maybe you can just move all at one time to resolution. I think.
I think that makes sense.
Motion?
No move.
I thought you were gonna say the rest of it, and I realize you're sharing right now, so I'll make the motion. It's a motion. Sorry.
She said
That was
so
good?
moved,
That was
so-
good, okay, so second, okay, great,
We'll try to pull whatever I mumbled from.
okay.
Okay. Judy's on it.
Nice trick, Trini.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
And Diane, you need them to adopt the grant agreement resolution as well, or hang on to that? The PM1 form? Was that the second piece?
Yes. If
The motion to accept the grant, here's where I'm confused. If you're conditioning it, then will you be signing it with those conditions on it? Or are you not going to sign it until the conditions are met?
Just reading it really quickly, I think to fit with the motion that you just adopted, you would sign it when you accept the grant agreement, because it says you accept and agree to the terms of said grant agreement. We haven't seen that yet, so it would be, we'll hang on to that one until you take final action so that they all fit together. You can do them same night. And that's not anything different. We've had this come up before. We've gotten the resolution ahead of the grant agreement and said, well, let's wait and see what the grant agreement says. I mean, they're generally pretty standard, but it makes sense to do.
Well, the draft, if I might, add, the draft grant agreement is in gears. So I believe you would have access to it. Otherwise, I'm happy to send it to you,
Yeah, I mean, we can go
however it's best.
take a look at it. I don't spend more time in gears than is absolutely necessary. And even then, I complain about it the whole time. So we could take a look at that, but it's once you do the final grant agreement.
Okay.
We can get it all done, and that fits. We've done this before. We did it with the Playhouse even. Might have been the last one we did that was a pass-through like this.
Do you need them to formally warn the public hearing part of this too? Was that
So the
part of-
the public hearing request we have here before you, pardon me, is for phase 2 of the project. We are going to VCDP, hopefully, with an application for $500,000 for phase 2. And the first part of that, to meet the application requirement, is to hold a public hearing. So we're asking the select board tonight to approve us having a public hearing at your next select board meeting, so that we meet the application requirement. And at that time, we would ask that you sign the single applicant document agreeing to allow us to apply for the grant.
You'll have a budget ahead of that meeting that shows the different expenses of the project, including a better idea of town admin.
Yes, we can have that for you.
So the motion would be, if you want to consider it, would be to warn a public hearing on the Heading Church Forest Phase 2 BCDP grant application for the March 13th meeting would be your next regular.
So
Yes.
moved.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
All right,
Anything
I
else?
think that was it for this one, unless I'm missing something.
Yes, no, that was all we had for today. Thank you.
Thank you.
UTV agreement follow-up.
So we left here last time on this topic with homework, which was to ask the insurer, is it possible if we had the UTV, had the trailer, but it was put behind a vehicle?
Slice?
Those were good ones, yeah. Got the ghost all the way out that time. We asked the insurer, see if we were to tow the trailer and the UTV behind a firefighter's private vehicle, because that was one of the things we were wrestling with, is how do you get it from station to scene? The answer was, would it be covered if we're involved in an accident? And the answer was, correct me if I get the quote wrong, maybe. Yes. So it would be situationally dependent, we couldn't get a better answer than that. So at a certain level, it's a kind of a policy decision. One of the things I talked about briefly with Andy was maybe there's a designated group of drivers and vehicles. We've got insurance information, we figure out some way where there's private insurance that names town as additional insured, will cover sort of it coming back the other way, and maybe through that kind of layering, we're able to figure out how to move the thing out of the station and make sure the insurance coverage is there for everybody. So it's not ideal as it's covered if we're doing this, or it's not covered if we're doing that, but that might help layer it in. It sounded like it would work on the VFD end, but these guys are from there, and maybe if they've talked about it more, I've thought some different thoughts, but we just touched base on it quickly. So there was that piece, and then they were just closing the loop on conversion of ownership at the end of the MOU back to the association that purchased it. I think you were leaning toward being okay in that in the last conversation, but I don't think we made a decision. And then there was a request to try to limit use to just PFD or just to fire personnel. I'm trying to remember the
So
actual.
it would be specifically trained RVFD person. I mean, I suppose theoretically we could train other departments, but they would have to be trained, and they would be fire personnel only.
Okay.
It is a fire vehicle. We can't really practically unmake it a fire vehicle.
So those are the two open questions on the UTV from the version you adopted in the days of yore. I don't even remember. I
Did you
think
just
last
list
spring,
things?
April, May, June.
Okay.
So it's really,
Trevor,
oh, sorry, Trini.
when we put this on the town, if the town agrees to take this and whatnot, and we put it on our insurance, it's not on our insurance as a fire vehicle, right?
Yeah, it's probably under the other category that we have for sort of equipment. Unless, although in our vehicle listing, it goes the other sort of heavy duty trailers. I'd have to see where they'd wanna put it. There used to be something called inland marine floater, but that's generally smaller equipment. So they might be vehicles, they might be in the vehicle listing, our other trailers are.
Okay, but not fire vehicles. It's not in with the fire trucks.
Well,
Fire.
yeah, I mean, there's one insurance listing and it has all the vehicles from fire trucks on through to the highway ones and the trailers and a few other things. So it's kind of one, I mean, they have the category breakouts, but they're just all in one listing.
And so there was some conversation in prior discussions about the vehicle that hooks to the trailer has liability also. Right, so for certain things, you insure your vehicle for the dollar amount of the vehicle plus what you're towing. And you set your weight limits on your registration of your vehicle the same way. So I haven't found in anybody I've talked to a way around the person who hooks onto this having to carry an additional insurance level to cover this also. Has anybody from the fire department looked at that? Like what is the liability to that firefighter when they hook onto that trailer?
So I have some notes here. Pretty much how you started it off was insurance said they may cover it under certain circumstances, if certain things are met. The trailer, their insurance would cover our vehicles even though we're using it in a fire department capacity, but not the trailer. And the two insurance agencies we called advised that nobody would cover the trailer under that circumstance. However, it's something we're in the notes I have here. Pretty much if something happens to the trailer and the vehicle it's towing behind, then really it's not, according to the MOU, the town isn't held liable to replace it at any point in time. You know, it's as a donated piece of equipment basically in the MOU. It says we're still going to be liable for any replacement cost if we so choose to buy another one. So it says here that the trailer wouldn't be covered under our personal insurance in the capacity we'd be using it, but it sounds like nobody would in that circumstance.
I think it really comes down to the lawyers and the specifics of the situation, because liability insurance, if you're in an accident, it depends who's found at fault and so on and so forth. I know as somebody who tows trailers regularly, my insurance covers what I'm towing. I've never tried that by wrecking one, so it's entirely possible that the right lawyer could ruin my day. And that's where, when you ask a lawyer for a clear-cut black and white answer, they always say maybe. And that's been our experience. Chief Bent reached out to a couple of different insurance companies locally as well as his own. I believe he reached out to Progressive as well. Nobody wanted to give a straight answer like you found for that reason. It's lawyers. But in his experience as a police officer, what he has found is that it's typically, whoever's at fault, their insurance is going to cover making the other person whole if they happen to be towing a vehicle. So be it. So it's a definite maybe.
Yeah, so Dan, what happens if you have a situation where, either something falls off the trailer going down the road, or the trailer comes unhooked, or the load comes off or whatever? Because what I was told when I reached out was we're getting into pretty murky area a private vehicle being used to attach to town-owned property. And you're exactly where you just said. The lawyers are gonna have a field day with it. It's not cut dry, right? Like, and now that driver is going to leave with a trailer that maybe somebody else was responsible for securing the load. You get down the road, somebody didn't, push down the top on the ball when to lock it on. The trailer's head down the road without you, kind of thing. And you say it doesn't happen, but there's cases where it has. I don't think we have any black and white manner in which to ensure this.
So to play devil's advocate in that situation, whether it's, let's say you've got, and this is a common one that we see from time to time, a broken leaf spring on a commercial vehicle. And that leaf spring comes off as they go over an overpass, leaf spring goes through the window and harms or kills somebody in another vehicle. Obviously that's an extreme case, but that driver and the driver's insurance, the company, employer, all of those people are going to be held accountable because they should have inspected that leaf spring before as part of their pre-trip. We're not held to the commercial vehicle standards in the fire service, but that's certainly not to say that we couldn't, as a policy, because we're creating the training policy, that couldn't be included in some way that a pre-trip is required. We're looking at an enclosed trailer, so there's much less risk of something coming off, because if it comes off, it's contained within the trailer. There's, obviously, if you've got negligence, anything's possible. But as a professional, I check my chains. I make sure that, even if the worst thing happens and that hitch breaks, I've still got my safeties. Those are all steps that any reasonable person would be expected to take, whether they're employed, whether they're private, whether they're commercial. So I don't think it's reasonable to stop the process of this based on a worst case hypothetical of everybody doing the wrong thing against their training, against what a reasonable person would do. I think we have to, at some point, give us as professionals the benefit of the doubt that we're going to, take the same duty of care, at least that we take with the multi-million-dollar fire apparatus that we drive around. That we would at least use that standard of care with this.
I'm not saying that somebody's going to drive like an animal and cause a problem. What I'm nervous about is we don't have a clear answer on whether this is even insured. We have maybe, depends on what the facts are, right? When we head down the road right now, when you head down the road in that fire truck, we know we're insured. And we don't now. In this scenario, we don't know that.
Let's say that I'm the driver that hooks onto that trailer. I know that I'm responsible for whatever happens with my vehicle. Whether I'm towing it, I'm going to be liable whether my insurance covers me or not. It's my responsibility to drive in a reasonable, prudent manner. It's my responsibility to make sure my load's secured. It doesn't matter whether I'm hauling town equipment, my own personal lawnmower, whatever the case may be. I'm responsible for, or at least I'm certainly going to be held responsible in the aftermath for whatever I did or didn't do. So I'm not, it seems like maybe we're just chasing our tails and not getting anywhere, where really we need to be finding a solution to the situation, and there's never going to be a perfect solution to it. Whenever you have lawyers involved, it's not going to be perfect. But we have to be reasonable, and certainly Bethel has successfully navigated this. For many, many years, they've been hauling trailers with UTVs inside. To the best of my knowledge, they've never had a problem. It certainly, I don't know if the town has already asked Bethel how they have handled it, but if they can do it, there's certainly a path for us to do it.
And
I
know
think
we've
it
been-
was Wayne and Mike were supposed to look into that. I don't know that I ever saw the results of that, but, what type of document are you proposing be signed by the individuals that you feel should be pulling this trailer? Are there,
In mutual respect, what do you mean?
well, there's conversation about identifying just a couple of people that can haul the trailer to make sure they have like the right insurance coverages and the training and whatnot versus anybody who is in any of the three departments just coming and hooking on and hauling it. Like, what does the document look like that you are proposing to get, to have them sign or to carry? Are you looking at like levels of insurance that they're carrying? Are they listing the town as an additional insured on their policy? Are they signing off that they understand when they hook onto that trailer, it's covered under their insurance? Like, what is that all? Because I just heard you say there's, you're not looking at everybody just hooking on and pulling it, and you're looking at training for folks that are going to drive the actual UTV, that kind of thing. Like, here's where I'm nervous. Something happens, we know we're all headed, right? In today's world, they sue everybody and everybody gets in there. And right now, if we get into this scenario and there's no insurance to cover this, it's coming out of everybody's pocket, right? Like, how do you know when an incident happens that you can pick up that phone and the insurance carrier on the other side says, yep, that's ours, we'll be right beside you? That's what I'm worried about. And I don't have a feeling like we've got that right now. I don't like maybe.
Training documents, I don't think.
I mean, basically, when it comes to training for anything, and I understand it's a little bit of a different area than the fire trucks themselves because they're under town insurance. We go through and train everybody. Like, nobody day one just signing a document would be able to just go drive it. Like, we would obviously have steps, just like our fire trucks. Just because somebody joins day one and they're on the insurance doesn't mean they can drive a $700,000 truck down the road. So it's going to come with some level of training, and then we're probably going to have to look at something. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be a document they sign perhaps, but we're going to have to make sure that things line up so they can tow it. It's going to come down to what kind of vehicle they have, right? If it does meet a certain weight limit, somebody with a half-ton pickup isn't going to be able to pull it. There's going to be restrictions on who can pull it around as long as their vehicle meets that expectation. We have quite a few of our guys drive pickups that are well able to carry that and are registered. You brought up the registration for weight in that class to be able to tow it. The UTV and trailer themselves don't weigh that much. So even guys with half-ton trucks, most of our department, probably 80–90% will be able to tow it. We'll have to come up with some sort of, document in the end that says you understand what you're hooking onto when you do it. Most of our guys tow trailers, most of our guys have UTVs, most of our guys have campers and trailers and so forth. So as Dan said earlier, I mean, you're not taking people from the general public and just throwing them behind the wheel of this thing with a trailer on it. Most of our guys know what they're doing. And as he said, this is, when we take due regard driving a $700,000 truck down the road, our guys have 2 years worth of time and investment putting into just getting this thing in the station. So I don't think they're gonna just go down the road with it and in any just manner. I think they're gonna take their time and make sure they're doing it the right way. If it comes down to making a document that says we agree to taking the responsibility to hook onto it with our insurance, and we'll definitely do that.
And as far as the training document itself, that I believe is addressed in the proposed MOU, that it has to be approved, if I'm remembering correctly, approved by the Selectboard as well, separately from the MOU. So.
And I think think it's great that you wanna do training, I think all those things are necessary, and I agree with you, right? Like, you don't just get, somebody signs off and says, go ahead and drive the truck. Again, you know, been around this stuff for quite a few years. But you still haven't got to the meat of this. Who's carrying the insurance to make sure that the liability there is covered? That's the part that's missing, and what we're hearing is, it's a maybe.
Well, I think realistically, it's all of us. So the town's insurance covers it up to a point. In my case, my personal vehicle insurance covers it up to a point. Depending on who's at fault, what specifically the cases are, and how good the lawyers are, they're gonna go after, you know, any and all, as you mentioned. But it's not going to be any one, like, the town isn't gonna be able to just say, oh, well, you know, go get a rider on your insurance and you're expected as a firefighter to take on all the liability for the town's equipment. And that wouldn't be reasonable, and I really don't think between the insurance company or the firefighters themselves, you know, we're already tasked with an awful lot of risk and liability, you know, on our own time. You know, there's always questions of, are we even gonna be covered under workman's comp when we're driving to the station to get on the truck? You know, one time you ask and you're told yes, and the next time you're told no. So we're already putting, you know, our neck in a sling doing what we do, and to expect, you know, much more liability to just be shouldered by private citizens who happen to be volunteering for the town really isn't reasonable on the town's behalf, and that's why the town has insurance. You know, I think at some point we have to, you know, see we're all on the same team. We all train, we prepare, we do the best we can, and you know, and we're all here for the same reason, to protect and serve our community.
On the note of us hooking onto our personal vehicles, I know, so I'm in charge of our truck and equipment committee within the firehouse, and we've had many conversations of doing some fundraising, or someday down the road trying to get our own just pickup, not another full-blown fire truck. The village firehouse used to have 4 trucks before the station fire. We're up to 3. We do just fine with 3 fire trucks. However, it would be nice to have just whether we fundraise for it and then we go through this process again and we donate to the town, and then it's a town pickup on town insurance towing a town trailer, or we get, you know, someday down the road we get a hand-me-down from the town garage when they get a new truck, however it looks, whenever then. That has been a discussion quite a few times about getting our own just pickup to park in the bay that would meet all those qualifications, then it would be on the town insurance, right? So that's been a discussion since the start of this. I think we're just trying to basically get through this part before we start that part. So again, even if we have to do the fundraising for it to get it in, and like I said, go through this process and put it on the town insurance, then it would be a town truck hauling a town trailer with town equipment in it, you know? So I don't know if that's been brought up, I don't know if that's news to anybody in here right now, but that's been talked about quite a few times, especially by myself. I brought it up many times in our meetings. Obviously that's not a next week or even next month or within the year thing, who knows, but down the road for sure. So this going back and forth on insurance of getting it towed by personal vehicles, hopefully is just gonna be a small time span before that gets resolved in the future.
So if you were towing it and something happened and you didn't have additional insurance, wouldn't that put you on the hook as well for being liable for that as well?
Absolutely, and that's why I'm saying, it's not, we're not going to be able to come up with a solution, from my understanding, where the town is wholly responsible, or I would be wholly responsible. You know, any good lawyer is gonna go after the deepest pockets and all the pockets they can get a finger into. So that it's certainly not going to, like, I have to accept, you know, that I'm going to have liability when I choose to volunteer to pull that trailer, right? And that's another barrier to entry for our firefighters. Not everybody's going to be willing to do that, which narrows the pool down even further to those who are willing to add that risk, do the extra trainings, be proficient, you know, and take on that level of care every time that, you know, we take it out of the station.
It's a lot for you guys to take on too.
That's,
Yeah.
that's a job.
Fair. But I mean, that would probably be, I mean, the kind of thing about like what Trini was saying about having like an agreement that they sign that folks understand that either they need to have like insurance that would cover that, or, you know, to protect themselves, I guess would be, I really want to make sure people are aware of that before they towed it and then something happened and then they are personally liable. That would be unfortunate if they could have just gotten an insurance, you know, bump up or something, you know.
But I think I'm a little nervous, Stephanie, too, that I'm not hearing that no matter what happens, the town has insurance that will cover us. Like, if there's an incident, what I just want to know is if there's an incident, is passive sitting there with us on this?
Maybe.
Yeah, but the answer was maybe.
That's what I don't like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody here likes it. I mean, none of the guys in the firehouse are gonna like it maybe either, but we also, a lot of us understand the fact that, you know, when something's needed, we're trying to make it happen, you know? I guess I don't know, if we were using our, say like when the floods happen, right, you know, and the roads aren't accessible by a fire truck, you know, we're taking our own pickups out there to go help people or go check on roads that are, you know, getting flooded out, to go help people or go get people out of their houses and bring them back to town. We don't have a trailer on our vehicle then, but we're operating in a professional capacity for the town. So I guess doing that, I guess, would it be any different? I mean, I understand we're not towing a trailer then, but we're acting as members of town, driving our own vehicles, our own insurance policies.
It'd still be a maybe. I mean, it depends on
And
how you're
that's-
deployed, who you're deployed by. I mean, that's what they're gonna have to unravel. That's why it's a maybe. It's
So
where are all the connection points, and then it could be.
So I think we're already in a maybe, right? And I think we've been there for a long time, and maybe nobody's just ever put that under the magnifying glass, because I think we've been there years in a row. We've been driving our trucks out on these flood calls, the back roads, like I said, get people out of their houses, pump out basements, you know, going out and checking and see what roads are even passable, you know, doing all these things in our personal vehicles, and nobody's batted an eye because we're doing the right thing. So I think maybe we've lived in this maybe for a while, and we've survived just fine. You know, so.
But there's a difference there, Andy, because the trucks have precedent, right? There's some level of precedent there, you know, and I don't think we're talking about operating the UTV at the site. Although that could be part of what they're telling us is a maybe too. I'm more concerned with from firehouse to the scene. Who's got the liability there? And that's where
It seems like all the insurance companies have given us a maybe as an answer, so I think we're just gonna, it seems like we're just going around and around on the same question, because both, you said your insurance company said was a maybe, all the ones we've contacted are maybes, so I don't think anybody's gonna get, I think at this point we've asked the same question a few times and we're just going around and around, and the insurance company said maybe, it's gonna come down to specifics of the situation, unfortunately, but that's the reality we live in, you know? As you mentioned earlier, people in today's world are sue happy, so I think it's just gonna come down to the situation. It's gonna come down to our guys operating with due regard and just being responsible, and that's why it's gonna come down to training and who's allowed to tow it.
But that could be a multi-million-dollar bill out of the town's budget in a lawsuit, right? If the insurance company says we're not covering it, and you're right, maybe we do need to look at the use of personal vehicles in these situations and what we do. I believe there's a rider though that can be put on insurance that covers some of that, but I don't know. I'm good with this if we can figure out how we know we've got some, you know, an insurance carrier for the town sitting beside us on this. You know, look at where we ended up in this one with the motorcycle in Braintree, right? Like that lawyer
So-
bill and settlement would have all been out of the town coffer if we didn't have passive sitting beside us. That's all I'm saying. I just want to know that passive is sitting beside us on a case like this.
I think a lot of it is gonna be, you know, anytime you're dealing with liability, it's who's got the best lawyer. You know, it's how can they make the case, and, you know, how can they drag it out until somebody gives up and settles. I mean, we've seen that after the fire. I don't know if we've actually finished settling all the lawsuits from that. It's nothing that's within our control. You know, so we can worry, we can wish, but we can only control the things that we have control over. And
But Dan, right now, we know we have the lawyer beside us, right? Our insurance coverage for that fire and for other incidents, we know we have passive beside us. Braintree incident with the motorcycle, passive was beside us. Passive paid the claims. Like, that's the difference. Going into something where we know the town may be on its own to hire a lawyer, pay the lawyer, go through all the processing, all that on, and pay the settlement out of town taxpayer dollars, that's what I don't want.
so if we don't have any control over the insurance companies giving us a clear, defined, black and white answer, what can we do to mitigate that risk outside of the stuff we can't control? That's where we're at right now. And
I think it may be that we need to get more people in the room to have that discussion of how do you make sure you're covered? Like, what does the insurance look like that you have to carry on the vehicle? And what does the, you know, what's out there for the town? What are the scenarios under which they would cover? Maybe we restrict the use only to that.
And Trevor,
Right.
is that something that you've got experience in talking with, I guess, Passive or whatever the town's insurance is, that you could get clarification of what they would need to give us a direct answer?
I made a note to talk to Passive and see if maybe with the right series of questions, we can at least get some guardrails as to examples of scenarios, and then maybe we can create a mitigation.
Like, what is it they need to see from us to make them comfortable?
Well, yeah, and even just, well, what's a maybe? What's a maybe yes, what's a maybe no? Like, what are the examples of that theoretically in insurance world where have these things fallen down, you know? So what creates a liability for the private vehicle driver versus the municipality? Yeah. You know, and then maybe in drawing out the distinctions, we're able to say, all right, here are the right set of guardrails for this, or this is what we need for coverage to make sure that we've overlapped, crosshatched, however you want to think about it.
And as I mentioned, you know, the membership's talked about trying to go the route someday of having just not another fourth fire truck again as we used to have, but just a utility truck to use in things as in the floods, towing the trailer, you know, many things we can use it for. And the day that comes, which, I mean, if we have to wait for that to use it, it would be unfortunate, but if I feel like that's another way around this kind of thing, because then it's all town equipment with town personnel, no personal equipment's gonna be involved in that in any way.
Yeah, and I think just with that, considering what we don't wanna do is keep acquiring expensive equipment sort of outside of regular channels and then bringing it back in and then trying to figure out how to maintain this kind of growing mass of things. With the other ones, we have the clear chain, we plan for it, we buy it, we own it. And so just making sure that it all fits, that we're not.
So are you suggesting that maybe we follow the standard procedure and request a pickup truck?
I think that would be cleaner, at some point, knowing that fire truck reserve, I mean, that's been the money for the bigger apparatus. And so it just has to fit in with whatever that consideration is, in terms of which truck goes next, but.
If we did it that way, could a nonprofit still raise, like, let's say it could raise 10 grand, which just
Right.
sounds like a lot to me, but if they could they then donate it to the town to help with that purchase?
I
A
think
restricted donation?
they could, but I don't wanna be in a series of MOUs that spell out whether or not we're gonna, I mean, that's where it's just, we gotta sort through those sort of policy questions. I'm not trying to overcomplicate it, I'm trying to make sure there aren't any issues up front or behind. And part of the challenge with this is we're trying to retrofit these things. And so it's all possible, I mean, it's,
This vehicle.
there's no other entity that we have that has the capability to, through a fundraising arm, pay for stuff, so it's
Right.
unique, if for no other reason than that.
I mean, because realistically, whether we went out and purchased a vehicle and donated it to the town, or the town went out and bought a vehicle and we made a donation to offset the cost of that, either way, a donation's being made, the town is acquiring a vehicle through whatever channel, and we're in the same spot. So, I mean, is it just that we're not as used to receiving things and versus going out and just buying the asset directly, and so it's uncomfortable, or is there actually
I
a
think
problem
Dan-
with doing it?
Dan, I think some of it is.
Well, it lacks
the way-
coordination to do it the way we've done it, where it's kind of haphazard and people come at it from whatever angle they've ever come at it. I mean, in sport, the municipal best standard would be everything goes through the same hub. It's scheduled based on priority. Every need is balanced, and then you buy them, the items that way. And we're not there. I don't think that makes us unusual, but that's not where we're at, not where we've been. But that'd be the ideal. So on every piece, because we got 9 big fire trucks, and we're gonna add a 10th smaller truck. We've got this, that, the other, and that's before you get into highway trucks and building and grounds trucks, and they're all coming out of that same, at least with the building and ground trucks, other equipment, that's the same sort of general fund pool of dollars for those reserves. So it's just, long story short, we gotta make sure it works right, and that there's balance, both short-term, long-term. That's all I'm concerned about. I think we can solve this particular set of problems without
No.
overcomplication, but everything's gotta work. So we're not spending time trying to shape the square peg down to fit in the round hole. Let's buy the round peg.
So I guess, Trevor, I mean, you're in the driver's seat, what would you recommend as the next step here?
I would say for tonight, let's try to get through the 2 questions on the UTV, because we can set that up if you want to. So then those 2 pieces are settled. We've done 2/3 of the activity. I'll go back to passive, try to figure out if in that conversation, in clearing up what the circumstances of maybe are, maybe something pops out, says, oh, that could be our resolution, and we're able to fix it. And then I think from there, we have the longer term conversation, and it could be through fire safety advisory about how do you guys wanna handle capital planning in total, in the aggregate. We started this a little bit with some of the OSHA conversations, we started a little bit with some of the bigger apparatus planning exercises, so there's some pieces there. How can we build that out, so then we're just on a schedule, and these things are easy breezy moving forward, in terms of this gets purchased in, replaced there, this is this need, everybody's agreed, we review it annually, and we're golden. So there's a couple of different pieces. But for this, let's see if, going back to like, maybe doesn't work, what else do we have? And then we can do the follow-up with Bethel. I looked through my, I thought maybe Teresa and I had a conversation about it, but we didn't. But I can follow up with them to see, maybe
appreciate
in
that.
pairing the passive conversation and the Bethel conversation, there's a moment of illumination
I know,
that puts us on the other side of the question.
I know Bethel has one, also, Pittsfield Fire has one, and I know they don't have a pickup right now, so I'm sure they're doing the same kind of thing, moving around personal vehicle wise, so, just for, if we need somebody else to talk to.
And we'll look at sort of a larger vehicle replacement schedule, if there's an older truck of the right size in a condition that we can maybe flip that way.
And that's kind
I
of what
don't
my,
have one off the top of my head, just because we've replaced most of those for a couple of years out. But that could be something that fits into the planning continuum too.
yeah, and I think from talking to the firehouse, bringing up the donation thing, I'm sure if we talk to the guys about it and we're like, hey, this is what we need to make it happen, 99% of the guys would be on board if we could do some sort of restricted donation from the nonprofit to help offset the cost. I'm not trying to take out of the fire truck fund and take from another department or kind of jump them in line. Like, we do what we have to do in our part to make it happen. If it's our thing we're bringing in, we're not gonna come and ask them to, wait another year or two. We'd handle it on our own. We're pretty self-sufficient in that regard, I think.
Trevor, do you feel comfortable knowing like what they would need for towing, like the size of the truck and all of the?
It would be helpful if you guys know that, just shoot me an email with.
I mean, a 3/4 pickup.
I think we were just looking at kind of what the town has, like just a crew cab, Super Duty, something along those regards. It wouldn't have any fancy utility. It would just be a pickup that would just, you know, some red lights on it and to just put a hitch in it, and that would be it. We just use it for little things around the town, like I said, when we go out and do floods and stuff like that, tow in the trailer, stuff like that. I think it would take a lot of the stress off the maybes.
It'd be pretty low mileage, pretty low usage, so basically, right?
Very,
Yeah.
and that's why I said even if it came from, to be a hand-me-down truck from the town, you know, what would we put for miles on it a year? I mean, you might put 100, 200 miles on it in a year,
Right.
you know, cause.
Yeah, so you don't need like a brand new pickup.
Hopefully the ideal
that's
world would
gonna
be 0 miles
be
on it in a year,
yeah.
but like even if it came from a town hand-me-down of someday, you know, that would be fine for us.
The one thing we talked about is taking an older truck, putting it in kind of general circulation, and so it'd be available to you, we just would have to make sure if it's in service, you can get it back, but, different things to consider, we'll look at that too. Maybe there's something there.
And so
I
then there
hadn't
were the
considered
2 points in the MOU that wanted to iron out.
Yeah, I had thrown one into an earlier draft, so just so you can see it, and that was the reversion of ownership one, that's the red line section,
Yep.
in, I think it's section 3 of the MOU, lines around 39, 40, 38 to 40.
39.
Yeah, so this is if, once it reaches the end of the useful life, there's an option for the town to basically transfer ownership back to the nonprofit association that purchased it. The reason I only put the one in there is because that's where we started with the request, and as the conversation went on, it had the second piece, which we can talk about too, which is about the usage limit. We had that conversation early on, landed on this version of the MOU, kind of came back around to that one. So we can draft something and stick it in there if you're interested, but those were the 2 other policy points to determine. Like I said, it's unusual because it's equipment that comes to us from a different pathway. So we don't really have a good, this is how we normally. So with the reversion of ownership, it's really just a policy choice. I don't know what we would do with it once it was out of fire service. Are we gonna use it to do something different with it?
I think,
See that, but who knows, I don't know I can't remember what the useful life is, 10
the
years?
idea would be to, in the MOU, have a line somewhere in there that basically said, and it's not you guys so much worried about, but we're looking kind of down the road. Some line in there that says basically if somebody tried to give it to, like, say, somebody 10 years from now tried to say, well, why do you guys have that? I'm gonna try to give it to the highway department. In that event, it would get reverted back to the nonprofit. Like there would be no avenue to just give it to another town department because we did the fundraising, we got 2 years worth of our guys' time and effort into fundraising for it. So like I said, not worried about this select board sitting here doing that, but maybe somebody years down the road doing that. So we just wanna make sure we're covered that it's not able to be just taken from the department and given somewhere else. We'd like something in that, like, let's talk about, black and white writing, having something in there that says, this shall not go to another department or reverts back to the nonprofit. Almost everybody in the department has agreed that they would like to see something like that, just because, like I said, that's our guys, 2 years worth of time and effort that went into that.
So the language in there ties it to the expiration of the MOU.
Yeah.
Because
Is
the
that-
MOU would cover the operating framework anyway, so it does say at the conclusion of the MOU, it goes back, is sort of the way it's drafted. So we don't get into it goes anywhere else or useful lives, it's, once this is over, it goes back, and it's, the MOU term is tied to, once, they're in service, there's no specified if it's shorter than expected or longer than expected, it covers either scenario.
I thought part of that conversation too was, it would leave the select board at that point open to saying we actually want to maintain this and actually upgrade it too, right? And so like if it was at the end of its useful life, but the town decided that they wanted to have that as part of their equipment, that the select board could then take it back and trade it in and then buy a new one, correct? Is that, or are we just gonna just not worry about that part of it?
Yeah.
Let them talk about it later?
It's mostly the replacements set up as a no obligation, so you still have the discretionary, or some future board does, to put that into a
Okay.
capital plan, but it doesn't spell out.
So if future folks decide that they wanted to maintain it as a town piece of equipment that we would replace, they could decide to do that, okay. But
I mean, it
otherwise,
could prove it's so useful, so valuable, we have,
right,
unfortunately, have more flooding events that we want.
maybe
We
something.
wanna
that
have
we
one,
do.
we wanna have one on
And-
the East Valley side of, you just never know.
To that point,
You know.
I'll switch hats here. As fire warden, I can tell you when we have fires, like a couple years ago, we had a tree on fire up on the top of the backside of Murphy Road. Hiking through the woods, trying to carry all the equipment you need to put out a fire at the top of a mountain, that limits your options, and it sucks.
Especially working in a volunteer capacity, we probably only had three people show up, because one of the guys showed up was one of our fire police members, so 3 firemen show up trying to carry, saws and extra fuel and water for the people going up there, and water cans to put the fire out with, and wildland rakes and all this and that. It's probably a good 2-mile hike up a mountain up there, and just stuff like that. Not that happens every day, but when it does happen, it's nice to just be able to go in and handle it.
Yeah.
My perspective as a fire warden, I'm responsible for controlling those types of fires.
Yeah.
I need assets like this to be available to me to tap through the fire department. Hey, I need this, let's get out here. This is set up for wildland firefighting. It's got a booster tank, it's got a hose reel, so we can actually bring the water to the fire. It also obviously helps us get the gear and things of that nature to where we need it. So it's not just let's go joyriding during flooding to check out the washed out roads. It is designed, it was intended to be a fire apparatus. That's the way it's been configured, and that, as the fire warden, I really would appreciate having that. From the fire side, the number of times I've been on calls personally where we've had to bring in Bethel because we've had someone who was injured out, it seems like every year we have at least one person who, is out logging, and somehow either they have a cardiac event or the tree falls on them.
Or hikers.
Hikers, we've had bicyclists now that we've got such an extensive trail system. We've had to cart people out by hand, having the equipment to do that more safely in a more timely manner, getting those individuals to the advanced support and care that they need at the hospital in a more timely manner can literally be the difference between life and death. So, I know we've had at least one call that I'm familiar with over, I believe it was Brookfield, that specifically called for this device, and we had to tell them, I'm sorry, we can't provide that mutual aid to you.
And that was with Brookfield, the state police, and White River Valley Ambulance there, trying to get to a patient. And I remember it, they put it right over the radio. They were asking for us to bring that patient to, and they had to get told over the radio that we can't help you, sorry. And that's, as you brought up, that's literally could make the difference. That's somebody's life, out there. So I don't know at what point we
kind of stop going around in circles.
Just to correct that though, they didn't ask Randolph for that device. They asked one of the East Randolph firemen who had one if he would bring it to the scene to make it easier to transport the lady down to the roadside.
As I remembered, it was said over the radio that Randolph Village has one and they cannot bring it. And that came from somebody in the Brookfield Fire Department. They were talking about it over the radio. They didn't tone us out for it. It was asked for over the radio, and then they were told over the radio that Randolph Village has one, they can't use it.
And it's entirely possible that then they ask some private citizen to borrow theirs.
It was actually a Brookfield fireman that took his to the scene.
So, I mean, basically, this has been a year and a half that we've been, without this, the apparatus is sitting there waiting to help people, and, we've been chasing our tails rather than getting it into service. So, whatever we can do to expedite that, it's specifically to the public benefit. Even if there is a little added risk with questions of liability and so forth, at what point do human lives take precedence over maybes? I think that's something we've got to consider.
So Trevor, I think it might be beneficial if we set some time up with Passive and one of the local insurance agents. I have a couple in mind that I think are really good, and have a conversation about what the different coverages are, what they cover, and then see if we can't figure out what that gap is. And then once we know that, figure out how we cover that. And right now we're going off we don't have everybody in the same room having that conversation. We're not controlling, like, what's the information we're giving to these folks to try to figure out what the actual coverage is, where we have it, where we don't, and what would need to happen for us to get it. And I think if we put passive in the room with some of these folks that know, we might end up with an answer.
Yeah.
I would make time to do that in the next couple of weeks.
So we can do that piece, and then how do you feel about, we've got the language on the reversion of ownership, and then there was a request to limit use to primarily VFD personnel, and then there was anybody with training that's in fire service was sort of the.
I think I like the language better of trained personnel responding to an emergency. Because we do end up with some of our highway folks out there, and I'd hate to have this piece of equipment have to be moved. And somebody who's got all the experience of moving it can't get in it because they aren't a member of Randolph Village, you know? Scott's crew is out there at these scenes. John's crew is out there at these scenes. They ought to be included to be able to move this piece of equipment if it needs to be moved on the scene.
So would those individuals be going through the training that we put our people through, including the continuing education training periodically throughout the year? Are they gonna make that time? Are they gonna be paid to come to trainings to do that? To maintain that?
If there's a training class they gotta take, and it's the same as what you guys take, yes. But I don't think we ought to limit it. I think anybody that we have there for the town that's responding to that emergency, that's trained, ought to be able to move that thing.
I think basically the only limitation that comes to mind, because you're making a reasonable point there, but it would need to fall under the control of the incident commander, so that it's not just, hey, I'm trained and I'm gonna freelance, but I don't report to the fire chief, so screw you. They need to fall within the incident command structure and understand that if they're responding to the incident, that the incident commander is in charge. So that would just be, my concern of making sure that they understand it's not just, okay, well, you have, the blessing of the town to, under certain circumstances, hop in and drive this, but that you need to fall within the command structure. If that makes sense.
If they're on the scene, they probably already are. So, I don't think we're gonna, if somebody's gotta move that sucker 10 feet over to get a truck through, I don't think they're gonna go try to figure out who's in charge and whatever. I have no problem with John jumping in that sucker and moving it a few feet if he's gotta get his truck through. That's the type of thing I'm thinking of. I'm not saying they drive it from the station all the way out somewhere or whatever. It's more of a,
And I see that, but it leaves it, again, these murky hypotheticals of, let's say we've got flooding and somebody from the town highway department just says, oh, well, I need to run some barricades someplace, and, well, why don't I just take the UTV? And they, they're trained, and so they jump in and they take it, and then the fire service needs it, and we're like, where in the world did our apparatus go? And that's where having them still route command and control through the proper channels within the fire department, I think is critical for that.
I think those are details you can work out. I don't think the select board's gonna get involved in who says Mother May I to who before they move it. But I think the language needs to talk about anybody responding to the incident that's a town employee at the incident that's had the training.
So do we wanna just do that under 4 with operations, there's the task to come up with a plan, do we wanna do it under that existing language, then we wouldn't hold up the MOU and the other conversations and keep them rolling, and then, cause those come back to the board anyway, per the existing language? That way you don't need to
Yeah.
amend the thing you've already done. It'd just be the one section to include the reversion, but under the operations, then that would have VFD draft sort of a framework, and then we can talk about any changes from that, so you'd be in the driver's seat to set the initial parameters, and then you can have a conversation about them, or say, yeah, these are good, or however it shakes out. And you wouldn't need to, we would just put the language in on lines 39 and 40, and then you can sign it. I still have to put in the make, model, and year, but you can drop that in anytime. So if that works for you, that takes care of two of them, then we do the insurance thing, and then, but the MOU is done, they can get rolling on the operations plan, and hopefully all these things come together.
This seems reasonable to me. Do we need a motion or anything to cover those things, or is this just?
I would make a motion to adopt the MOU as amended, and we would put in the reversion of ownership language.
And that's something you guys have seen and agreed upon too, so we're not like approving something that the fire department isn't agreeing with?
No, those are the points that we were.
Like I said, our main point when it came to the MOU was just making sure that if it tries to go anywhere someday down the road at the end of the MOU, because it sounds like, if I'm hearing it correctly, if some board down the road tries to move it somewhere else, that's gonna conclude the MOU, because it will be taken from the village fire department, and here it clearly states, at the conclusion of the MOU, it gets reverted back to the nonprofit, so that kinda covers us in that. Am I reading that correctly?
So the MOU covers the use of it while it's in service. Once it comes out of service from village fire, then the MOU concludes, and then it would then revert back.
Right.
Is the change, so there isn't a break in there that says,
So if somebody tried to, right, but I guess, I think we're saying the same thing, so basically if somebody tried to move it, say to the town garage, 10 years down the road, right, they say, hey, the highway department needs one of these, that concludes our MOU, cause we don't have it anymore, it would be taken, it would end up getting reverted back to the nonprofit in the end anyway. So it seems like there's not a window for it to be moved somewhere else.
I wouldn't read it that way, but people in the future might be way more creative than I am, but I think we're covered.
Okay.
That's the key thing, if we can clarify that that's the intent of it, then.
I think that creates that loop, if it's in service, the MOU concludes when it's out of service. Presumably, it doesn't, the operating pieces, so how long is it in service, how it's used would be part of those guidelines VFD comes up with. If it comes out of service, the MOU expires, it goes back, that's how this is linked up.
Cool.
I think you'd really have to get stretchy to try to send it.
Somewhere else.
Yeah.
Oh, that was one of our guys, just a general concern from the membership, we just wanna make sure we're covered.
So, the motion would be to accept the MOU with said amendments.
Yep, so it would just be the reversion language, the rest of it's already in there.
Okay, so moved.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Trini?
Oops, sorry. Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay.
Alright, we'll move on to the town meeting discussion.
You just
Thank you,
send me
guys.
make model, all that, I'll drop it in, and then I'll do a signature line version with that stuff on red line, and we can figure out how to sign.
Perfect. Do you just wanna let us know when you have a meeting with Passive, and we can probably have somebody?
Yeah, I'll probably have a conversation with Passive to do sort of the guardrails conversation, and when we set up the larger one, we can try to get everybody in a room.
Appreciate that.
I'm sorry, what's your name?
Ivan?
Ivan, what's your last name?
Sweet.
Thank you guys for coming, thank you
Yeah,
again.
thank you so much, that was
Yeah.
great.
Appreciate you having us.
Alright, town meeting discussion.
We usually just roll in and deploy Napoleon's battle plan, which is to show up, see what happens,
Awesome.
and it works okay. But we could do PowerPoints, we could get fancier, if you wanna do anything. Usually we've said, here's where you've been able to find everything, we've warned these things, what kind of questions do people have? I think for the online one, or the pre-meeting last year, you guys had me just do a little brief intro. Say what's different or what's not, or where are the pressure points, and we can do that again.
We're gonna have the booklets available at town meeting, right?
Yeah,
So,
we'll have the paper one soon, we've got a digital copy now.
Thank you guys.
So long.
Okay. I'm also putting together a little FAQ type document so we can cover some of the other stuff that wouldn't be in the other ones. Why is the ambulance question broken out separately? What's the special appropriations request up for? Are there any new positions, you know, in addition to the stuff that's out there for what are the budgets? Do we know tax rate increases? So we'll have that too for the, at least the Saturday event. I don't know if I'll have it done by Monday for sure, but. I don't know if there's anything else you want to do.
We had talked about getting some information out about why we separated out the ambulance line item. Are we doing that still?
It's in that FAQ document. I got a draft done. I can do that, and then if I wanna add more into it, I can probably get that out before Monday, or at least posted by Monday. Most of it's in there. And we can always add to it if we wanted to.
The Monday meeting's here at 5:30?
Yeah.
Okay.
Monday night, 5:30, we'll have so that's the statutorily required pre-town meeting event. And then the Saturday event is, we go through the stuff passed around the ballot. There's only the handful of things to be done from the floor at the end. The budget committee and the appointment of the clerk treasurer. So we'll see that Saturday morning.
I don't see too many questions, like, besides basic things. I don't think we're doing big changes or, so I think a basic FAQ, a few things would be more than plenty, be my guess. I think the other questions will come up naturally if people have them.
Yeah, I think some of the questions that might come up again, you've already answered, and there's not a change in the answer, which is, why are we not having a larger police conversation now? So we've been 2 officers short for, we wanna get sized up and then have that larger conversation. And what are the cost drivers but I mean, based on the questions that have come in generally, we don't usually get a lot of business, but as people get closer to coming in, doing the absentee balloting, you know, voting early in the offices, we might get some, what's this, what's that? It's been real quiet. Real quiet. Which I don't know, usually that's a good sign, but.
Quiet in terms of people not asking, or there's not a lot of people coming in.
Yeah.
Quite a few people have come in, but they
Yeah, the
aren't,
voting's usually pretty busy early.
they aren't asking.
But it's just, they're not. And sometimes you see these cycles, we've had with the police stuff, things have been a little more elevated temperature wise and stuff for the schools, and we might just be coming down the backside of that curve while we wait for the next big thing. But
Yeah, I haven't been getting too many, like, in the past years, there's been a lot more questions before voting. I feel like people kind of are understanding where things are at.
yeah.
But that's my sense as well, but. Okay. Well. Any other thoughts about
Ready?
coming in?
Yeah, ready to move to the next
Yeah.
item?
I just, quickly on the manager's report, we've submitted a bunch of stuff for reimbursement for FEMA from the July event, where we might have a breakthrough on the North Randolph Road Bridge. We are, need some notes, I just don't remember which one I made them in. Some clarification on some procurement stuff there. The December payment has been submitted, obligated, so that's gonna be $194,000 for that December 2023. So we're starting to see those reimbursements come in. Same thing with the North Wells project, for example, the Northern Borders 450 should be headed back this way soon, all that paperwork's in. So that's good, all of that money that went out will start to come back. We'll have a slightly larger load to match, at least right now, in the December 23 event. When we get into the July one, just based on the way the disaster declarations shook out, sorry, I'm trying not to sneeze, it's, believe it or not, yours would seem quiet compared, very violent sneeze. It's upsetting, troubles me.
I'm scared just thinking about it.
Yeah, it's pretty frightening. Then I just distract myself. We're working, we might be changing out the air handling exchanger systems here in the spring. We have been battling with heat loss all winter. If you remember, all summer we battled with air conditioning issues and system issues. So it's comfortable down here, but if you go upstairs in the office, it's probably gonna be a little warm because we have to turn the heat on manually, basically. Let it run overnight. So we've got a couple of different ways to patch it through. But, so if we come back and ask, it should fit with that sort of larger building project that we talked about in terms of reconfiguration of some spaces and safety adds in terms of overall footprint and budget. But I'll let you know if for some reason it doesn't. Generally, anything else. Seventh grade boys basketball headed to the finals tomorrow. It's a big deal. So if you're born in Berry City, you want to watch middle schoolers play basketball. Yeah. Snowstorm, they've been doing snow removal. They're gonna do some more. Is it this morning? They're gonna come around 3. We've been doing that and then working into the day. So doing downtown areas. Hope is tomorrow we'll do some parking lots. If anybody watches this later, we don't have a big audience now, but if you're in one of the town lots, by ordinance, supposed to move your car every 2 weeks. Some of the challenges we have with clearing lots is that people don't move their car for, we'll just say more than 2 weeks. Some cases,
Sure,
years.
you could say more than
Um,
you.
And so it creates a really difficult situation for them to clear snow, that people aren't happy because we've got these large pockets of banks and stuff. We can't move the snow if the cars are in the way. So to the extent people can, after a storm, clear them off, move them out, try to match up with our snow removal cycles, that'll be helpful for everybody. We would prefer not to tell or leg it when people move it, but when we try to, per the ordinance, make contact with the owner, but we don't always know who it is, so sometimes we get unhappy people.
You can check with Scott, see how that they made out this afternoon.
Scott and his crew were on it this afternoon, doing a little recon to see if we could get people to move.
Any thoughts, Scott?
I don't know if you're muted or we can't hear you, or you just, yeah.
He's over it.
I think that's all I had for that.
Okay.
We'll be back with some news. I don't know if you remember, we talked about the centrifuge one time. Of course, then you actually have I think we came up with a locally based, cost-effective solution, so we're just doing some of the final math on that, which will be good.
Great. Next on our agenda is an executive session.
This one should be real fast, 5 minutes, just a quick update on collective bargaining. It's really no different than last week, or last time. But just to let you know what the next step is.
Do we need to invite Scott into that as well?
I would, since he hung on this long, I think he would feel like we left him out if we didn't include him, and he'll be in tomorrow and it'll be all sad.
Yeah, we don't, I
We
can't have that.
I don't think we have enough nerd clusters for that.
We're just gonna see if I have to bribe him.
Alright, so I'll make a motion
So you-
that executive session is prudent and necessary.
Yeah.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Fine.
And I'll make a motion that we need to enter executive session pursuant to 1 VSA section, right?
Yep.
313A, 1B, collective bargaining.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And that we invite Scott to join us.
I was just gonna say that too. My motion's also invite Scott. That second improved.